CEOs especially, they're expected to have a personal brand. Elon Musk has cut through all the car companies with his brand. His personal brand has been able to create cut through in a very saturated industry.
Daniel Priestley, an award-winning entrepreneur and best-selling author of Key Person of Influence. As the co-founder of Score App and Dent Global, he's helped thousands of businesses scale with AI and entrepreneurial excellence. Daniel turns ideas into empires.
We're not trying to be building a ridiculous personal brand where we take a photo of our breakfast and our lunch in the morning and we go to the gym and take a photo of our gym routine. And that is not how executives build their brand. I am going to send 3,000 direct messages a month. So,
wow.
Yeah, message 100 people and we're going to say, hey, I noticed that you work in X, Y, and Z. I've just written a piece of content on LinkedIn. I think you might find that piece of content interesting. It's based on my experience of doing this with this with this. If you're interested, check it out. I'm not going to sell anything. I'm just going to tell them I've written a piece of content that's based on my experience. Barack Obama 2008, he went and he won the election using social media. So the Obama Everywhere campaign in 2008 was the first presidential social media campaign, where he had the Twitter accounts and the YouTube accounts, and he had the Facebook. He was interactive. He was publishing all this content on social media. And he was so powerful on social media that he won the presidential election. But that was the moment that every executive went, hey, wait a second, we got to get on top of this. So that's where the moment changed.
Daniel.
Yes, thank you very much for having me on the podcast.
That's all. Are you ready to unleash?
Of course, I'm always ready to unleash.
This is what I always see from you in all of the podcasts and all in social media. I'm so inspired by what you're doing on social media. But let me ask you that question before. Why you're an entrepreneur?
I've always been an entrepreneur. For the last 20 years, I've been building my own businesses. I started my first company at age 21, and I've done like a dozen startups since. I've actually never had a corporate job, like a proper job in a corporation.
But why? Why at the beginning?
Age 15, I discovered a business book, and it was all about starting and growing businesses. And while other 15-year-olds were reading all sorts of other material, I was reading books on business. I had an economics teacher who talked to us about microeconomics, and I was really passionate about the idea of how microeconomics worked. I got a job at McDonald's, and I got to know the franchisee who owned our McDonald's, and he told me, that he owned a business. He didn't have to work in the business. He, scaled the business, and he had 6 McDonald's at the time. And basically, all of the people who stood out to me when I was a teenager, they're all entrepreneurs. I like the fun, the freedom, the flexibility. I like the risk. I like the fact that you eat what you kill. That there's no one protecting you. You can do really, really well, or you can fall flat on your face. I like that. I don't mind that. That's part of the attraction.
If you come back by the time itself, and let's say that you had like unresistible offer at the beginning of your career. Let's say that at the beginning of your career, you take X as a revenue as an entrepreneur, but they offer you like 10X as a corporate. What you'll take?
I'll take 10X. You got to remember, I was 21 years old. I get easily bored. But look, here's what happened. When I was 21 years old, I started the first company. I did 0 to 1.3 million in the first year.
Wow.
And we got to 10.7 million in year 3. So it was very fast growth. And actually, what happened is I was offered $14 million for that business. I messed it up. I messed up the negotiation. But, that all happened before the age of 25. But if someone had have offered me 10X to go and join a corporate, I'd be thinking about that, right? Because that would be a big number.
That's amazing. So what are those factors that if you come back that by the time that makes you an entrepreneur? Is it the surrounding, or is it how you raised up?
So look, there are different types of entrepreneurs. There's not just one type of entrepreneur. There are people like myself who are really good at starting with a blank sheet of paper. And they're entrepreneurs, right? They're founders. They're the ones who start from scratch. But then there are entrepreneurial people who buy businesses and grow them and scale them. There are people who join teams when the team is small, and they scale from 2 million to 20 million or 20 million to 200 million. I think there's a couple of things. So entrepreneurs are taking a risk, either reputationally or financially. they're accessing resources that they don't currently have. And that's a big part of entrepreneurship. You're reaching out into the world and accessing resources that aren't there. So if you already had all the resources, you'd be an asset manager. You'd be moving assets around. If you had a budget, you'd be allocating resources. But entrepreneurs don't. We don't start with budgets. We have to enroll people. We don't start with teams. We have to enroll people. So we're allocating resources that we don't have, or we're accessing resources that we don't have. And we're innovating. We're trying to do something that hasn't really been done. We're addressing a market need. We're testing to see if there is a market there. So those are the types of things that make someone an entrepreneur. Often entrepreneurs are, or classic entrepreneurs are a little bit square peg, round hole, type people. They don't typically fit in. Many entrepreneurs describe that they didn't have an easy time in school. Because there were a lot of rules and regulations and the way you have to do things and when you can talk and not talk and all that sort of stuff. And entrepreneurs tend to disregard a little bit of that by their nature. They're a little bit rebellious, a little bit misfit. And that was true for me.
Mm-hmm. So based on your experience, if you come back by time, have you ever hit a time where you have an empty bank account?
Oh, loads of times. Yeah, absolutely. By the way, I'm not a typical entrepreneur. So most entrepreneurs are 42 when they start. The average age of an entrepreneur founder is 42 years old. So starting at 21 or 22 is not the normal situation. I think it's only 5% of founders are less than 35. Under 35 is very, very rare. Most entrepreneurs are over 35, with the average being 42. Sometimes you hear a story like mine, or you look at Mark Zuckerberg, or you look at some of these entrepreneurs who started very young. You've got to start with the fact that that is not the classic entrepreneur. That gets a lot of attention because it's so rare. But it's kind of like, we don't put airplanes on the news if they land safely. We put airplanes on the news if they overshoot the runway. So it's the same. It's entrepreneurs who make the news are very young because it never happens. So anyone who's listening to this thinking, I'm too old because I'm 48 years old. It's like, well, actually, you're just marginally older than the average age of an entrepreneur when they start their first company. If you talk to a wealth manager and you say, what is the classic story of an entrepreneur? They will say, based on my experience, they started the business at 42, they grew for 15 years to 57, and then they sold the business for several million or many millions at 57. So the average age of a multi-million-dollar exit is age 57. So it's a 15-year thing that you start at 42. So it's important to know that that's also a big part of being an entrepreneur, that you don't necessarily start young. You typically start with experience. Now, you said, have I ever had no money in the bank account? All the time.
How do you deal with that situations?
Well, you make sales. You get money in the bank account.
But if you don't have a source of income, maybe, sales sometimes it doesn't work at that time. How do you find ways?
Well, for me, look, there's only two ways you're going to get money in the bank. You're going to bring in an investor who's going to invest or lend the business money, or you're going to make some sales. And you're going to make some pre-sales where people prepay for things that will be delivered later. The way that businesses typically scale is we go through a series of J curves. A J curve is where you lose money and then make money. So if you have a restaurant, it's a J curve. You're going to spend $300,000-$500,000 setting up a restaurant before you sell your first plate of food. So, that's a J curve. If you start a software company, you might spend $500,000 developing the software before you make a sale for $20 a month subscription. So when you're growing businesses, you're constantly managing these J curves, these lose money before you make money situations. Some businesses have more savage J curves than others. So restaurants, retail, physical locations, they're all big J curves. High innovation or high development costs, big J curves. If you're going to patent something, if you're going to have a medical innovation that needs regulation, big J curves. You can't sell it until it's regulated. So all of those sorts of things, those are the big J curves. But then there are businesses that don't have big J curves. So for example, selling services to corporate. Normally you go into corporate and you tell them about what you can do for them and you show them some case studies. You do a research assignment, which they often pay you for up front. So you might say, look, we're going to do a survey of all your employees and we're going to see how they feel about this one and this thing. We're going to identify a problem. That first piece of work is 15 grand. And then you go and say, okay, now we're going to deliver the service. We're going to fix those problems that we identified, and that's going to be 60 grand. And then the corporate goes, okay, cool, here's the money. So there are some businesses where the J curve isn't very big at all. You know, you're selling something up front. So, you know, I always say that if you're thinking of starting a business in the beginning, stay away from things that have very deep, you know, that require the deep pockets at the beginning, unless you can access the deep pockets. But look, how have I handled it? I just make sales. I'm just really good at making sales when I need to.
Focus,
yeah. We book the diary out and we do 30, 40 meetings in a week and we just make the sales.
That's amazing.
I've had plenty of times like that, yeah.
You spoke about the corporate, right?
Yeah.
And when the first time that I looked at your book, I found that it's named KPI, right? And because I was a corporate guy, so I understand that KPI...
Key performance indicator.
You understand this. So if we come at the key person of influence, can you tell us a little bit about what's inside and how can it help executives and CEOs building their personal brand?
So if we look at all industries are held together by key people of influence. So you essentially kind of have three levels to any industry. You've got newbies, people who are just new to the industry, they're learning their craft, they still need training, they still need development for the basic functionality. So just to function, they're still learning the ropes. Then you've got what I would call worker bees. Worker bees are people who are very well trained up, they can do the job, they're reliable, they can turn up on time, deliver what they say they'll deliver, and get paid, and everyone's happy. And then you've got key people of influence. These are the people whose names come up in conversation. They typically go networking in the right circles. They win business. When their name is attached to a project, then the project goes ahead. They champion things in organizations. They're the sponsor within organizations. If they're in the room, then it brings everyone else into the room. So those are the key people of influence. They've got a name. And in many cases, they don't have to do the functional work anymore. They're doing something different, which is the influencing work. Now, we see this all the time in Big Four accounting. You know, you get someone who's extremely good at being an accountant or an auditor or something like that. They know all the functional things really, really well. But then they make partner, and now they don't do any of that anymore. Their job is to, open up the little black book, bring people to the table, pitch the firm, all of those sorts of things. So it's a very different set of skills, but now they're being the key person of influence. They're being the face of the organization. So here's the thing. Human brains don't really remember corporate brands. We don't emotionally connect with them. I can prove it to you. If I said to you, what color is the G in the Google logo?
It's sometimes red, sometimes blue.
You think it changes?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
90%.
When it's just the G, it's the four colors, right? When it's not just the G, it's always blue. So it's the G in Google is blue. You've seen that 10,000 times.
But I don't remember.
But you don't remember,
yeah.
Right? So we don't feel much for corporate brands. I'll give you another example. The most loved brands in the UK are the football clubs, right? The football clubs are, people have like their grandparents followed this football club and then the parents follow. It's like 3-4 generations going back with the football club. All of the football clubs combined have about 250 million followers. And Cristiano Ronaldo has 650 million followers, just one player. So we love people. We love people much more than we love brands. We can see examples with the Kardashians. They enter into a saturated industry like makeup, lipstick and hair and makeup, hugely saturated, hugely mature. Boom, they enter billion-dollar brand rapidly. So they have the ability to just mobilize a marketplace. So a key person of influence is someone who's built a personal brand that represents a business brand.
So if I come back to the executive part and CEOs, from your experience, how CEOs and executive or senior leaders that they're stuck in their corporate and they want to change something in their life, how personal brand can help them to take that step?
So I've worked with, and I won't give the brands away, but I've worked with people who are now, that when I started working with them, they were middle to upper level in the organization, and now they've stepped into the leadership roles at the highest levels. So someone who's gone from doing pretty well, is now the chairperson of a major organization, big brand that everyone's heard of. I've worked with someone who's now the CEO of a massive software company. I've worked with FTSE 100 level executives and people who aspire to be at the absolute top of organizations. In every situation, when we built the personal brand, suddenly they just rocket to the top, right? So it's like, it's kind of like being underwater and you inflate the balloon and you go straight up to the surface.
It's like helium. You take the helium and go up.
You're up.
Yeah.
So the personal brand, look, here's the thing. We're not trying to be building a ridiculous personal brand where we take a photo of our breakfast and our lunch in the morning and we go to the gym and take a photo of our gym routine and, look at me posing in front of a Lamborghini. Like, that is not how executives build their brand. Any of those misconceptions that someone's got where they're sitting there thinking, oh, I'm not going to do all that stupid stuff. I'm not going to dance on TikTok. No one's ever going to say dance on TikTok. Oh, I'm not going to go on, Instagram and photograph my breakfast. No one said do any of that, right? So we're talking about sensible things that are appropriate for executives. Being more active on LinkedIn, publishing some thought leadership, sharing some of the things that you can shine the spotlight on that your team have done, right? Being the one to actually say, hey, look what the team have done today. This is an exceptional thing. Being a champion within the organization to show everyone on LinkedIn, this is what we've been able to achieve. We're really proud of this. So you're doing sensible things, and as you shine the light onto the trends, the ideas, the achievements, you're building your personal brand. Sitting there quietly hiding behind the logo, that's it's not going to get you anywhere. Not these days. CEOs especially, they're expected to have a personal brand. Tim Cook is a deep introvert. He does not naturally feel comfortable on a stage. But he knew that if he was going to take over Apple, he had to step into those shoes of being able to present the products, present the team, be the face of Apple. Today, he has twice as many followers as Apple on social media. His personal brand is twice as powerful as Apple's corporate brand, and Apple's got the biggest brand in the world. Right? So he knew he had to do it. Elon Musk has cut through all the car companies with his brand. His personal brand has been able to cut through in a very saturated industry. Who's the CEO of Porsche? Who's the CEO of General Motors? Who's the CEO of Volkswagen? Who's the CEO of Tesla? We all know. Right?
Yeah, for sure. But if you ask me about another brands, I will not.
You don't know the other ones.
Yeah, that's why. Do you think that the digital personal branding and the social media can influence your real personal brand?
Well, that's why. It all comes back to digital. So this whole personal brand conversation is really only made possible by digital. So look, prior to 2008, some CEOs wrote a book. Bill Gates wrote a book called The Great Road Ahead. And some CEOs were coming out with books. Some CEOs would give talks. Steve Jobs and Richard Branson were the two executive CEOs who were kind of like showing that you could build a personal brand as an executive, but they were doing it in traditional media. They were getting on stages and all of those sorts of things. But the turning point was Barack Obama, 2008. He went and he won the election using social media. So the Obama Everywhere campaign in 2008 was the first presidential social media campaign, where he had the Twitter accounts and the YouTube accounts, and he had the Facebook. He was interactive. He was publishing all this content on social media. And he was so powerful on social media that he won the presidential election. But that was the moment that every executive went, hey, wait a second, we got to get on top of this. Right? So that's where the moment changed. So it's all digital. Digital has three superpowers. It transcends space. So if we record this here in Dubai, it's going to be seen in London and New York and Boston and Singapore. So it transcends time. We record it today. It'll be available in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, maybe 100 years. Who knows, right? It'll transcend wear and tear or decay. If we watch this one time or a billion times, it doesn't lose any quality. So the digital infrastructure, the digital media, the digital asset allows an executive to transcend time, space, and decay, right? So it allows them to get their message direct out there. The impact of that is they end up hiring better talent. They get immediately recognized and respected within their organization. People bring them deals, so they win more organizational deals. They can partner faster. They can get a message in alignment. They can create alignment within their organizations at a much deeper and faster level. So all of those things, they're all made possible by digital. You take away digital, then we're back to square one.
I see a lot of CEOs and executives on LinkedIn and social media. What they're into, they just brand the company. Do you think that could be under the umbrella of personal brand, or they're harming themselves?
It's not that they're harming themselves. It's just that no one cares. So it's irrelevant. No one follows no one follows business brands. No one remembers business brands. No campaigns that business brands do get remembered. Nothing compared to what a personal brand can do. I mean, the big corporates are getting beaten up by the people who embrace the personal brand. Ryan Reynolds, he comes in and does a payments company, boom, straight to multi-billion-dollar valuation. Comes in and does a mobile company, boom, straight to multi-billion-dollar valuation. Whereas if we look at the share price for some of the biggest mobile companies in the world, they're in decline. The ones that have got personal brands attached to them, they're on the up and up. So it's so important. I can't stress it enough. Hiding behind the corporate brand just simply means you might as well be wearing an invisibility cloak.
I like this, but sometimes
Well, it's called Unleashed, right? I can't just tiptoe around.
I like it. So I see a lot of executives and CEOs. Sometimes they're hiding behind the shield of the brands, and it's very hard to detach themselves from that. If someone come to you like a CEO or executive, and they have this, I would say, in their psychology, something in their back end, they cannot detach themselves from the name of the company, because they feel that all of the values that they are carrying, it's under their positions and the titles. How you help them detach themselves from that?
Well, you can still use it. It's a great asset. When you embody a big brand, people give you a lot of respect. But the ability to speak freely as a voice within the brand, this means people attach the weight of the brand to you, but they also then listen to your voice. So, if people know that you're an executive with a large company and you give a podcast, people are listening to the podcast. If you write a book, they're going to buy the book. If the executive gives a great pitch, gives a great presentation, and it's videoed and put on YouTube, that means that it doesn't just inspire the people who are in the room, it could inspire thousands of people who watch it on YouTube. So it's about thinking about how all of these interactions could be captured and used. Many executives are giving great talks to their team, film them, put them online. All right. Yeah. Many executives want to get a message to their team. There's two ways to do it. You get, a department of the organization to script something, and then you read the lines and there's no heart and soul behind it. And, no one watches it, and you release it as an internal behind a password type thing. Or you have the confidence to say, actually, we're going to start putting more stuff out there. Now, obviously, you're going to have some conversations behind the scenes. You're going to have to get alignment within the executive team that everyone wants that. They recognize the value of it. Sometimes within corporate, you have to beg for forgiveness after the fact.
100%.
Right? And you need to try something and be willing to say, hey, look, I'll delete that. I apologize. That somehow that made its way onto the internet if it goes wrong. But it is very important that that you do find a voice that complements it. It's almost like a good business has a great culture. It has great values. It has great vision and mission. But the executive has to bring that to life. So I'm not saying go off script. I'm not saying that you shoot from the hip and don't, you just say whatever pops into your head. Be on brand, but be the embodiment of the best bits of the organization. Tim Cook is the perfect example, right? We don't know anything about his personal life. We don't know anything about, what he has for lunch or dinner, or what his favorite, favorite animal is or favorite color is. We don't know anything about that, but we know that he represents Apple really well. He's the embodiment.
That's great. How I believe that most of the CEOs and executives as well, when it comes to their small circle, I would say, inside their company, somehow I would say they build authority inside their company, this circle. But some of them, they are afraid from the fear of judgment when it comes to the social media, because it will show the reality. So how do you help such guys to crash these limiting beliefs? And anyway, you will be judged. How we can overcome this?
Well, the first thing is it's really hard to get people to watch anything. So like you could put stuff online. It's very, very difficult to get people to watch it. So the idea that what people fear is they're going to say something and then millions of people are going to watch it or see it, that never happens. That's never going to happen. You're going to put something out there and like 12 people are going to watch it. And you go, oh, okay, that's pretty safe, right? You got to work hard to get people to watch things. So there's time to learn. We typically think of, we think of learning cycles, and it's like you hop onto a motorcycle the first time and it feels terrifying. You ride a motorcycle every day for 100 days and it feels the most normal thing in the world. So the first time you go out and represent the brand publicly as the face and put it online feels terrifying. And then 3 months later, it feels like the most normal thing in the world. The CEOs that I've worked with, they took forever to start posting on LinkedIn, and like they created policies around it and all this stuff. I said, look, let's dial all of that back. No one's going to watch. No one's going to care. Let's just see what happens. Let's put something out there and see what happens. Assume that 1 million people are not going to watch this. Right? So then they started doing it, and they realized that actually it was all positive. Like a new employee says, "Can I join the team?" Someone says, "I saw you on LinkedIn. I'd love to have a chat about a partnership deal." So by virtue of the fact that you're concerned about it means you're not going to do anything silly. You're going to be if anything, you're going to be too conservative. You're going to play it too safe, and no one's going to watch anything. So, you have to kind of like come out of your shell slowly, and that's what will happen.
Do you regret things?
Yes and no. I don't like dwell on anything. I'm sure I've got little regrets here and there, but everything unfolds for a reason, tends to be. I don't have any major ones.
If you come back by time, let's say that you have, Sand of Time, Prince of Persia, this machine. Huh? If you come by your Dhaka, just put it on the sand, and you come back by the time. What's that thing that you would change?
Oh, there's a few things I'd definitely change. But obviously it would change everything else that happened. But like early stage for me, I got an offer to sell my company for a lot of money, $14 million. And I messed up the negotiation, and we ended up not doing the deal. But it was a done deal. It was like heads of terms, and I was just immature and didn't know how to, and had no experience in negotiating that size deal, or didn't know what to expect or what I was meant to be doing or any of that sort of stuff, and I messed that up. So I would have, at 23, 24 years old, I would have done a $14 million exit. I owned 100% of the company at the time. So, that would have been nice. There's one. That's an example.
But what would be that skill that you missed at that time that you want to change it?
The skill would be, I would have gone straight to my mentors and talked them through, and actually, rather than trying to figure it out on my own, I would have gone to the mentors and said, hey, look, this has landed on the table. I need help. I would have put my hand up and said, I need help with this. I don't know how to do it. But instead, I just kept going to the meetings and, trying to wing it.
Do you believe in coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I just, it was funny. At the time, I just didn't recognize that was the moment that I needed coaching the most. I thought coaching was something that I would do to kind of improve the day-to-day running of the business, but it was actually, I needed coaching in that as a critical moment. There was a critical moment, a situation I hadn't faced before. That was the time I needed coaching the most. I had in my mind at the time that coaching was something you do to improve the day-to-day. Not to get a particular moment right.
What's that one thing that you're very proud of?
We've been able to enroll a phenomenal team. So at the moment, I've got a group of companies. We've got 5 agencies. We've got 2 tech companies. We've got education and training business, global business. We have customers all over the world, and we're a team of over 120 people across all the different companies. And just everyone's a nice person. We all get along. We have a great culture. Everyone is motivated. Everyone's talented. We have a very diverse team. We have people who are, we have someone turning 70 this year. We've got people who are like in their early 20s. We've got, a really great, I'm proud of our culture. I'm proud of the results that we get. We across the whole group, we smash it. We're growing fast, we're profitable, we're successful, we're innovating, we're having fun along the way. So, what's not to love?
Touch wood, I would say.
Touch wood, right?
Touch wood. So, if you come back by the time as well, what is that biggest struggle that you had in your entrepreneurial journey?
The whole thing. It's always, entrepreneurship is a big struggle. Problem with entrepreneurship is the more successful you become, the bigger your ambition and the bigger your ideas. So you always, the personality of the entrepreneur is to bite off more than you can chew and to take on new problems. So a lot of entrepreneurs, just when things are going well, they start a new business, or just when things are going well, they buy a new business, or just when things are going well, they open up a new market. So like they can't help themselves. Just when everything's going nice and smoothly, they want to disrupt themselves. Entrepreneurs thrive on disruption. So I'm that as well. So any opportunity to be an idiot, I'm straight in. I jump 2 feet into the pool and say, oh, look, let's open a new market. Let's launch a new product. Let's stretch ourselves even more. Yeah.
If you tell me what's the difference between an entrepreneurial mindset and a corporate mindset from your experience dealing with both?
So the brain, I think of it as having 3 settings. There's the reptile, which is the aggressive, upset, emotional, not very logical, short-term. We've all had reptile moments, right? You get cut off in the traffic, reptile. Something doesn't work the way you want it to work, reptile. Your phone can't get internet access, reptile. All of those things are those reptile moments that we experience. And then the next mindset is called autopilot. Autopilot is where you're just doing what you always do. So, you're just going through the motions. You've done it 100 times before. You just, you can do it in your sleep. So autopilot is doing things within your comfort zone that you've done many, many times before. And then visionary is where you're making up something new, you're innovating, strategy, compassion, love, empathy, passion, all of those things are in the visionary mind. This is the neofrontal cortex. And, this is the part of the brain that thinks globally. So you kind of, that part of the brain, if you solve a problem here, you think, maybe there's people all over the world that could solve that, that would want that solved, and maybe I could scale this. If you have a problem, you think, I wonder who's solved this before. Let me access, what they know. It's the part of the brain that thinks in much longer timescales. So you might think, where do we want to be 10 years from now? What do we want to be celebrating in the year 2030? Well, what do we want to, what age of the company do we want to expand into the US? Right? So you're thinking in terms of big geography, big timescales, all of it. When you're in that space, anything feels possible. So when you're in corporate, you spend a lot of time in autopilot because you're not going to go reptile mode because that's bad look, but also corporate stops you from making cataclysmic decisions. There's no decisions that are like urgent, important, everything's going to fail. And not only that, even if you make bad decisions, you're still going to get paid, right? And on top of that, even if you make lots of bad decisions, they'll performance manage you out over 100 days, so like you got plenty of time to think. So you don't go reptile so much. Also, you don't go visionary because it's not your business. You don't have your fingers on the controls. Even if you're the CEO, it's still, you've got to enroll a whole committee of people to get anything done. So like even having a visionary moment while you're in an airplane or on holiday, You come back and it dies so quickly because everyone's busy and, oh, well, we need to get these. In 6 weeks' time, we'll have a meeting about all the meetings that we're going to have. And by the time 6 weeks rolls around, okay, it's done. It's forget about it, right? So you're not visionary and you're not reptile. So that means that you're always in autopilot. It's the opposite when you're an entrepreneur. You're always reptile and visionary. So a little thing happens and you feel like that's a personal attack. You know, so someone doesn't like your product. Damn,
I will not leave you.
I'm going to have them thrown off the building, right? And then on the flip side, you have an idea. Well, you could implement that. If you sit there and think, why don't we open up in Germany? Oh, okay. You could, if you want, book a flight to Germany right now, tonight, and go and have a look, right? So anything's possible. So you swing wildly between everything's going to go horribly wrong and everything could happen amazingly well. And you go bing, 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 bing. So it's like the entrepreneurial roller coaster of high highs and lows, whereas the corporates are like, So there's that big difference. People who leave corporate to be entrepreneurs, they haven't experienced those high highs and low lows so much.
What could influence someone in corporate or just change someone from corporate mindset into an entrepreneurial mindset?
Starting a business.
Yeah.
Starting
this is the only thing, huh?
Yeah, well...
But what could be the influence? Because everyone wants to have like a business.
Yeah, until they've got one. Look, a lot of the time people in corporate, they see something that should exist. They've tried to get that idea across the line inside the company. They keep coming back. They can't stop thinking about this idea. Sometimes it's a little bit of jealousy. You spot someone who you worked with previously and they go and start a business and you go, oh, they're doing really well. Or you work with a client and the client's an entrepreneur and you think, gee, wow, they raised $5 million pretty easily. Now they're off starting a business and the company's already valued at 50 million. Well, I want a bit of that. Maybe you work on a transaction or maybe you're part of an M&A deal where you acquire a business and you think to yourself, I could have started that business. I could have been acquired by that business. So there can be a little bit of envy, a little bit of jealousy. Grass looks greener from the other side of the fence. The really good reasons to start a business is you've got an industry insight. You know something's changing in the industry and you've recognized that change will equal this, this, and this, but none of the companies are going to be able to move on that fast enough. It has to be a smaller business that gets that done. So that's an industry insight. Second one is a technology insight. So you recognize and you say, AI's just come out. That's going to influence my job in these ways. Someone's going to build a portal that builds the AI in and does the portal thing. I need to be doing that. Or, wow, we could collect the data for that. We never used to be able to get that data, but that data would be really valuable. I'm going to start the company that gets our hands on that data. So that's a technology insight. Or the third one is a customer insight. So customers start behaving in a certain way, wanting something, but people haven't figured it out yet. And they're going, oh, customers are changing their behavior. We need to adapt to that. This big company is not going to get there fast enough. I'm going to start a business that adapts to that customer insight. So customer insight, technology insight, industry insight, those are three really good ways to start a business. That's
amazing. How did you scale your first business from just being a solo entrepreneur and come into multi-million-dollar company? What are those factors that you take it into consideration?
So there's a couple of different phases. In the UK, we've got the British military and we have something called the British Army Museum. And I take my kids to the Army Museum. And they actually talk about how the British Army scales its teams. There's a poster on the wall that says, this is how we scale up our teams. So what they do is they have a 2-person scout team. And their job is to go and scout whether there's an opportunity or a threat or something's going on. And it's 2 people. And then they have a 4-person fire team and then a 8-person section and then a 30-person platoon. And then it goes up and up. So I love that with entrepreneurship. 2 people start a business. 1 can sell, 1 can deliver. 4 people run the launch campaign and actually start generating more clients. 8 people run a steady business that does 7 figures of revenue. And then 30 people run a steady business that does 7 figures of profit. And essentially, that's my scale-up formula. So from idea, we go 2 people. We do a little bit of testing on the idea. Then we go 2, 4, 8, 30. And we're just basically, at each phase, we've got milestones that we need to work on. There are different things that have to happen along the entrepreneurial journey. At the early stages, we have something called ideation. Ideation is starting with a very raw idea and going through multiple processes to try and improve the idea, including coming up with better ideas. So you say, I'm not going to work on one idea unless I've got 10 ideas. So that's ideation. We have something called MVP, minimum viable product, fast, cheap testing of the idea. What is the fastest, cheapest way we can test? My favorite is called a waiting list. And a waiting list is where you just simply say, we're launching a piece of software next year and it's going to do this, this, and this. If you're interested in that, join the waiting list. So that's a simple...
In terms of the waiting list, so how... You mean here from that perspective, how do you generate leads? Because if you want to have like waiting list, you have to have like leads to test with them.
Yeah, so for me personally, here's how I do it. On LinkedIn, I'll put a signature piece of content, and that piece of content kind of outlines a thesis. It might tell a story, it might have some problems, it might have the typical solutions that don't work, it might have the solutions, might have some case studies, right? Normally 500 to 1,000 words, so it's a central piece of content. That piece of content has a call to action, which is, I'm considering addressing this. I'm going to be setting up a product or a service to address this. If you're interested in hearing more, join the waiting list. Right? So bottom of the thing has a call to action. Then 3 posts a week, I'm going to drive people back to that central piece of content, and that happens. And then I know people are going to hate me saying this, but it's true. I am going to send 3,000 direct messages a month. So
wow.
Yeah, right. So about 100 a day. So what we're going to do is we're just going to get out there and we're going to message 100 people and we're going to say, hey, I noticed that you work in X, Y, and Z. I've just written a piece of content on LinkedIn. I think you might find that piece of content interesting. It's based on my experience of doing this with this with this. If you're interested, check it out. I'm not gonna sell anything. I'm just going to tell them I've written a piece of content. But that's based on my experience. When I direct message people, I have a formula that works really, really well. And it is, I construct a sentence that is, I did something special with a certain type of person and we got a remarkable result. Here's where you can find out more about it. Right? So it always references something we've done. So I might say, I might reach out and say, in 2016, I launched an online scorecard campaign. We generated 90,000 leads and made $20 million worth of sales. I've done a breakdown of how that works. Here's the link to check out our scorecard marketing campaign.
And by this way, you capture the lead in that way, right?
Well, at that point, I'm just getting a little bit of attention. But once they like it, once they join the waiting list, that's my lead. I've now got someone who's they've opted in. They've said, I'm interested in that. So when we try and sell something, the bar is this high for someone to buy something new that they've never seen something before. So they've got to be 99% sure that it's a good decision. But when I say, I'm working on this, if you want to know more about it, join the waiting list. Well, they only have to be 10 or 15% interested and they're going to join that list. Now they've opted in, now they want to hear more and more. And if it's a good idea, lots of people opt in. And if it's a bad idea, no one opts in.
How do you define what's good people or bad people in terms of percentage?
It depends on the value of the idea. So if I'm selling something that is a online training for $100, I'm going to need lots of people. I'm going to need thousands of people to buy that. If I've got a high-end consulting package that's $250,000, then if 10, 15, 20 people say I'm interested in that, that's my first million of sales is going to come through. So it really depends. If I message 3,000 people and 100 people opt in, it's pretty good, like 3%. That's starting to tell me, but that's only relative to the value of that opportunity. You need a lot more than that if you have a low value opportunity.
How do you know that those people are interested? Maybe you opt in them, right?
When we do a waiting list, we ask for name and contact information, but then we ask them 5 questions. So we ask them, like, what have you tried that, what are you trying to, what problem, what best describes the problem would be question 1. What best describes the outcome you're hoping for? And there's multiple choices. What have you tried that hasn't worked? What price would you expect to pay to get this resolved? At what price would this become prohibitively expensive that you couldn't afford it if it was higher than this price. Something along those lines. But basically, I want to know the problem. I want to know the outcome. I want to know what they tried that didn't work. And I want to know a couple of questions about what people are willing to pay.
But if just you received like great feedback on that, and the time that you launch your product and everything, sometimes people, they just revert back and it's not working. How do you make sure that your idea till then, once you start launching, you will make sure that the sales are in place?
So I always, to make sales, there's a process that we follow called LAPS. LAPS is leads into appointments, into presentations, into sales. So when I look at something not working, the question is, where is it broken? So are we generating leads, but they're not booking appointments? Are we generating appointments, but they're not sitting through and engaging in the presentation? Are we presenting people, but they're not buying, they're not making the sale? So even though you've asked a question that's kind of like, what if it's not working? We need to get into like fine tune which part's not working, right? So leads, appointments, presentations, and sales is my first 4 things that I'm going to go and look at. And it's often the case that, hey, we're generating leads, we're generating appointments. The presentation doesn't equal the sale. So we have to present it differently. Or the presentation's great, but then they're not buying. So the price is wrong. The terms and conditions are wrong. We've got to go back and talk to people and say, hey, I'm curious. Why didn't you buy? The best entrepreneurs, we want to get face to face with our customers as fast as possible. And an example of this is a friend of mine who's a billionaire. He's sold 3 companies worth 100 million or more each. And when he launched a recent technology product that was going to be $9 a month per user, he sat down and he did dozens and dozens of sales meetings, one-to-one, face-to-face, with customers who were considering a $9 purchase. Now, think about it like this. He has a jet. He has a $45 million jet, right? He is not sitting down trying to make $9 sales. He's sitting down there trying to understand customers and understand what makes them tick. The difference between super successful entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs who don't make it is the super successful entrepreneurs understand that their job is to figure out how the customer works. In Economics 101, they tell you that basically everything comes back to demand and supply. So there's a demand for something and there's a supply for something. We can manufacture the supply of something. If I want to build water bottles, I need to manufacture a bottle. I need to manufacture a lid and a ring top. I need to manufacture the label and I need to fill it full of water. That's the manufacturing of the supply. There's also the ability to manufacture the demand for something. So if I take this to market, I could have 1 million of these sitting in a warehouse.
Nobody will take it.
Maybe no one's buying them. So how do I manufacture demand? I'm going to do sales and marketing. I'm going to go and maybe improve the brand. I get an influencer campaign, right? There's all sorts of ways to manufacture demand. 90% of people who work in corporate, they are working in the supply side. And because they're working in the supply side, they've never thought about how the demand works. When you go and become an entrepreneur, you have to become the master of the demand. How does the demand happen? So you have to get close to customers. You have to get really close to, you have to watch them buying. Like if you're doing a consumer product, you have to watch them buy. Sam Walton used to walk around watching people in the store and taking notes about how people browse and what eye height they have and all of those kind of things. So you have to become a master of how customers buy. So that starts with understanding your LAPs: leads, appointments, presentations, sales.
I love LAPs.
You like that?
Yes, I like.
Do you know, when I work with new businesses, we put a big poster up on the wall and we track their LAPs numbers for weeks, and we say, week 1 you generated 13 leads, 2 appointments, 1 presentation, 0 sales, and now you've got 130 leads. You got this many, right? We can actually see it evolve over time.
It's like a funnel.
It's beautiful. You can see them evolving as a business. And they think, I haven't really improved. And I say, look at your LAPS numbers. Your LAPS numbers are great.
That's amazing. So last thing that I want to ask you about, if there is an entrepreneur, he or she, they have great idea, tried many times over on it, did their best to make it happen and to make it work, but for some certain reason it doesn't work, and they want to raise the white flag on themselves. What is your best advice to them?
Well, entrepreneurship is a process of failing. You perfect scenarios that you fail fast, you fail cheap, and you fail with your reputation intact. So ideally, you're trying to fail fast, cheap, and proudly. I'm a big believer that from corporate to entrepreneur is too big a bridge, too hard. The best bridge is from corporate to direct report to an entrepreneur, and then an entrepreneur. So phase one is if you've been working in corporate, you need to be a direct report to an entrepreneur first, and then you become an entrepreneur after you've been a direct report. That's for most people who want to make that transition. If you go out and become an entrepreneur and you've failed and you want to raise the white flag and you're still committed to being an entrepreneur, then you may try and go and be a direct report to an entrepreneur. You might want to fall back into that. So during your entrepreneurial journey, you may have met some successful entrepreneurs. Maybe you went to some awards nights and saw some people who are winning awards for their businesses, or maybe you came across some other exciting entrepreneurs. You need to say, hey, look, I'd love to join your team. I've learned so much in the last, corporate experience and startup experience, but what I really miss is the team environment. I'd love to be part of your team. I'm going to do everything within my power to grow your business. The key insight here is that you must be a direct report to the entrepreneur. So even if the business has 10 people or 100 people, every single week you are in conversation, reporting your numbers, having conversations with the entrepreneur, and that is where you're going to do your entrepreneur apprenticeship, and that's the best mid-step into entrepreneurship.
Daniel, it was amazing hosting you here today, and I wish you all the best in Dent Global and with your amazing vision, with your contagious positive energy. And I'm sure that you're inspiring thousands of entrepreneurs and corporate every day, so keep inspiring.
Thank you very much.
Unleash is the bridge between my purpose and my mission. And my mission is unleashing the human greatness to its utmost potential.